pass from Havili was magic. The shift on for Crotty. Boom, far down you go, Quackett Smith. Me, oh my, I have enjoyed that. Yes, boy.
Sit back, relax, put your belt on, enjoy the show.
I think it was another real good showing in part from them on the weekend. We had a 15-all draw, so they've had a win and 4 in their first 2 games in the Tri-Nations, which is an awesome start. This one could be said it's Hodge versus Sanchez in terms of off the boot. Both got 5 kicks at McDonald Jones Stadium in Newcastle. So we haven't played many games there before. I think we had a 6-9 loss against Scotland there. So it's
an improvement for Australia.
Yeah, we're improving. Harry, do you want to take us into the injuries?
Yeah. Obviously, you guys had a lot of injuries in this game, which when we get on to talking about next week's game, it's going to raise a lot of questions that we have for you. But obviously, Thomas Kubeshi didn't play after banging his knee up in the All Blacks game. You also had Juan Imhoff go off with a hammy or a knee injury. I saw the ice in the back of his knee there. So I think he jumped up for a high ball in like the 15th minute to Tom Wright and then had to come right off, which got Philly on pretty early, which, I mean, let's be honest, is a great thing anyway. Just to rattle through them as well, Kremer came off with a head injury assessment, but he was very concussed. It just took him a while to get off the field. You had Nicolas Sanchez, looked like he was just limping around with a groin injury for a long time. Buffelli looked a bit dusty, holding his groin as well. So, I mean, there's been no talk from the coaching team about that one, so I assume that's pretty minor. And then on the flip side of things for the Wallabies, Pataya, the same, just looked to be kind of holding himself out in the field when he was on one leg as well. What do you think about how the Pumas actually dealt with all those injuries and how it had to really change, especially their backline, how they played?
Yeah, well Boffelli, the idea was for him to play in the second half, so they got him on way too early, and he wasn't 100%. He missed the first match for that reason. So when an uncapped player, Sinti was the replacement for that match because Argentina, they're not playing with a replacement fly half. Viotti is not fit yet.
Oh, right.
Should be okay for this week, and they do want to make changes. So Sanchez, he was minor injury, but they say he's okay to play against Australia this coming weekend. Who else? Kramer, he's cleared. They say he's okay. Imhoff, he won't play. I mean, he could, but why would they? They've got all these other wingers playing. The guy had the knock that he did.
Do you know what he did?
Yeah, it was a hamstring, as I understand. They're all they're officially saying was a muscle injury in his upper leg. So we know what
Definitely
that
hamstring.
Yeah.
So who else? Oh, De La Fuente is fit again, so he'll be able to play for the first time. Boffelli injury cloud, but let's see. I'm not sure if they'll play him or not. I would suggest Cordero will probably replace Imhoff because why would you start Boffelli if he has a minor problem? There's also Moshano who's there, and plays in France, for goodness sake. You're not going to fly him over for nothing.
Mojano's there, right? I didn't realise he was with the squad.
Rather.
All right, well, look, Paul, I will stop you there because you're putting out some spoilers for the preview we'll get to a little bit later on. Talking about this game, the Wallabies in Argentina. The Wallabies dominated possession with 63% possession and 70% territory. I think we were all certainly worried about the Wallabies matching up in terms of physicality, but I think particularly in that first half, the Wallabies came out absolutely firing. So it didn't seem as if Argentina had gone quiet, but I think the Wallabies were probably the more physical of the two sides, and I don't think we all expected that coming into this game. So what did you make of that?
Yeah, I thought Australia were far better. When Imhoff went off, I was saying to myself, we're looking at a 30-10 defeat, something like that. Not because of the player, just because Australia was with everywhere. Argentina were in their own half. and Australia were phase after phase. They were getting breaks. Argentina was able to just trust the player outside them and ultimately hold firm. And they have mentioned Cheka for his rugby league influence in the defense. I think that was pretty evident.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I thought Australia deserved to win by. I mean, I don't want to give a score line, but clear victory. And I thought they were really unlucky, and obviously not to score. Patea was, you can't blame him for that. I mean, in another ground, it was a try because it depends where the dead ball line is painted, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah, it was a funny one. I think we came out firing, but I mean, you touched on it. I mean, we had the chances, we created the chances throughout that match, but I think we just failed. Right at the moment that we had to score, the last pass or whatever it might be, we had too many errors, and there was still a fair bit of pressure from that defensive line from the Argentines, which made us make some mistakes, especially at the breakdown as well. A few forced turnovers, things along those lines.
Yeah, it was always, as you said, Nels, it was the last movement. So it was either last pass, a drop ball, or that's when we'd concede a penalty. And that's certainly credit to, we talked last week about how good Argentina was at deciding which rucks to commit to and when to just fill the field. And so it certainly was part of that, was Argentina picking their moments, holding the line for quite a long time, and then picking the moment to go in there for a steal. And the Wallabies just couldn't seem to capitalise their momentum, which I guess has been typical of the Wallabies recently. But yeah, I think, what did you think of the kicking game? We talked a lot about last week how important the kicking game was going to be. So not only for penalty goals, but for territory. Obviously, I've said the Wallabies ended up with more territory, but I think Hodge was very good in that regard.
Sure. No, I thought critics of Hodge should really ease off. I think, he missed the match-winning opportunity, but I mean, just his general play was excellent. And the guy's been thrown in there. I mean, Australia have realistically not had a first-choice 10 for a number of years. I mean, the World Cup, it changed in the tournament. People wanted Kurtley Beale to play 10, all kinds of examples. So, I mean, there are half a dozen names who have been playing there. And now Hodge comes from literally from nowhere. And he has the talent, and he's very young. So I think he's a very promising player indeed. I thought he was excellent tactically, did what he was supposed to do well, got Australia where they needed to be in the field. Argentina were obviously patient. That was the big difference from years gone by. They didn't cave in. They held firm. And Australia, the one thing I would say, I mean, maybe this is Hooper, maybe it's somebody from the coaching position, but the turning down penalties to kick for the corner is a big no-no. You don't do that. Obviously, it's a confidence factor, but I would always, if you have a strong shot, let's say 80% chance of landing the goal, so you're 40 meters out or something of that variety, I would always kick the points. They didn't do that. New Zealand didn't do it either. So obviously they were both teams were of the view that, look, Argentina are fragile, they'll cave in, but they didn't in either match. So this is one of the potential talking points going forward. That I mean, people have criticized teams for their lack of attack year in, year out, but realistically, defense is what wins games. And this was the first, you may not know this, but this was Argentina's first ever rugby championship match without conceding a try.
Oh, right.
So
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Huge.
never before. Yeah. So, I mean, was it 15-6, I believe.
Yeah.
Australia were 15-6 up, I believe. And I mean, getting back to a draw, that was a victory realistically. And considering how play went, I mean, Argentina had no try scoring opportunities, unless you want to talk about full time. And there have been people questioning what happened there. Was that a penalty, taken without the ball, or possibly penalty try? I don't know, but I mean, just getting a draw was a victory because you're playing Australia in Australia, and they've got essentially 60% of the possession in the territory, and you're coming away with that, a week after.
Exactly right. Like we had literally 63% of possession. But the interesting thing out of it, talking about the kicking, the Pumas still kicked 36 to 27 times. So with 37% of the ball, they kicked it 36 times. Like last week, they kicked
more than one a minute.
Yeah, like they had 26 kicks last week. So obviously they're quite comfortable on the defensive side. They don't necessarily feel that they have to hold the ball to, exert that pressure that they have been doing and trying to use that defense almost as attack. But do you think was that something that they'd planned to do? Like, did they really want to be kicking this much more? Or do you think it was something that came out of the pressure that was exerted, early on with the defense of Wilson and Tupou coming out and making those hits? Do you think that they resorted to it a little bit more so?
Well, from what you said, my mind is going back to France from Japan from the World Cup, because that's what they did. Kubeli just kicked. That was their game plan. And people were really critical of that. And so I think what they've done is they've stuck to their guns in that regard. They're still doing that. They essentially want to make the other team play at them and try to control where they are. So they're comfortable if they're outside of their 22. That's basically as I'm reading it.
Yeah.
But they're also wanting teams to try things that they don't really want to try. So, I mean, Australia's 2 near tries, both the first one was kind of like I would say a hit and hope or kick and hope, something like that. Just chase through. I mean, not criticizing it at all, but that's just how I read it. And the second one, the forward pass, that was pressure. I mean, previous years you would see easy try. We're talking about a 20 kilo mismatch from the wingers, and it wasn't a score. So I do think that the idea of playing, sticking to what just getting it right, that they have tweaked what wasn't working, and ultimately the difference between now and the World Cup is their defense, because they scored tries, but they conceded a lot. England just killed them at the World Cup, just killed them, and the game was over before the red card.
The thing that stood out to me that you mentioned before with Australia opting to go to the line or to try and take their chances attacking instead of taking the points, I think probably the biggest plays in the game were the Argentinian defensive lineouts and the Wallabies' lack of execution at the lineout. The Wallabies had 22 lineouts to throw in against the Argies, who have now been very good 2 weeks in a row defending. I think you had Guido Petty steal 2 5-meter lineouts when the Wallabies were hot on attack, trying to actually convert some points. And then you had another one with Brandon Pangaramosa not throwing straight when it wasn't even contested. But that was a huge play for me, to do that twice in a game, to actually, I guess, rob the Wallabies of that opportunity. And it's been such a strength for the RGs, and Guido Petty has just gone from strength to strength in that area.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of people are talking about him as one of the great Argentine second rowers. So right up there. I would also place his name in the conversation of the best lineout workers. I mean, who is better? You tell me. So I think that he's exceptional there, really reliable. But what they've been doing is also with that is they've moved away from just him getting 9 per match. So more guys in the air now. That's good. But Petty on defense, he's going to challenge. And those two ones he did win, they were really, really important, obviously.
Yeah, I think they're game breakers.
Yeah, I don't think we've said this we've said this many times before, but probably not with Paul. I think Guido Petty's easily one of the top 3 locks in the world. I think you've got to put Brodie Retallick, perhaps Itoje up there, but Petty is just amazing in all facets of the game, really, isn't he? I think you could be right. I think he's probably the best line-out operator in world rugby, you'd have to say. So fantastic from him. Now, look, I do want to remind Paul, it was an Argentina home game on the weekend in Newcastle, your home ground. But no, look, I think a valid point was to do with Argentina kicking a bit more. When you are defending the whole time and you are pinned in your territory, you have to kick naturally to get back out of territory. So I think the stats there kind of illustrate how the game played out that way. But no, look, talking about Argentina forcing Australia to do other things or things they don't want to, I think that's spot on. I think the grubber through, look, that showed Hunter Paisami just has skills upon skills upon skills in terms of, we didn't know he could do that, but still, it's a lower percentage play. So by filling the field and making it so difficult to penetrate, you're forcing teams to throw loopier passes or put kicks through it. You put in lower percentage plays. So that just plays testament to Argentina's defense. But Hunter Paisami, he is. I think I went back and listened to our podcast last week. We said he's certainly one of the better Wallabies, and that it would be very hard to drop him from the team. But I think he's almost he's getting up there as one of our most important backs. I just think the battle against Chocobates this week was fantastic. 2 very young inside centres who both have 100% success records against New Zealand. I mean, what more can you want?
Yeah, look, I can't wait to see that combination with him and Jordi Batea build. Jordi Batea, maybe not making all the right choices at the moment. I was quite frustrated on a few occasions on the weekend, that's for sure. But, I mean, for me, he's got all the skills. These 2 guys are going to be playing together, week in, week out for Queensland next year. And I can't wait to see that continue to build. We were touching on the line-out before. I think something that frustrated me a little bit was that I thought the Wallabies scrum was really dominant early on, very early on in that, that first half. They were very, very solid, and we just couldn't seem to get any pay out of it. In fact, I think the only tight head that was won was by the Pumas on the night. I do think it was in the second half after, Tane Tupo had come off. But the prop Codella, what do you think about him being brought back in? Because I mean, for myself, I like the Pumas. I know a lot of the Argentine players, and he wasn't someone I was expecting to rush back in.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's 35, so there you go. His last cap was against Georgia, and that was in 2013.
Yeah.
So that was the last mid-year international before Cade became coach. He was coach for the November series. He came in. So look, he was overlooked predominantly for the reason of Orcad's attitude, which was let's develop from home. And we can take one guy from France, but we don't want 2 or 3 of them. So ultimately, it was not merit; it was politics. He should have been in there. Pagashko's retired. They essentially looked at the Jaguares props and said, look, the guys who are available are decent, but are they good enough? We're going to be playing Wallabies and All Blacks, and they were right to pick him. They initially didn't pick him; he was added. So when he was initially left out, I marked his name down as should be there. So I was not surprised at all.
Is he someone that you thought was like I guess a key scrummager? Is that it, or maybe is it showing that they didn't quite trust the props that were in the squad in the World Cup? I'm trying to interpret why you would bring him back this late.
Yeah. Well, if you watched Super Rugby, what we got of it anyway, you would have seen a promising prop, Joel Sclavi.
Yeah,
he was in France and was brought home. And look, he quickly moved ahead of Medrano. this year. They're like, look, that's just much better, much better in the scrum. So they ultimately got rid of him, not by, you're not good enough. No, he was injured. So that happened, and Pagasa retired, and it's like, okay, let's look somewhere else. And I mean, so it was not like a prize, like a bonus prize or anything like that. It was just that this guy's actually been tearing it up. I mean, the French media have named him in dream teams or team of the week or whatever for a number of seasons. His name's always considered. And it was his time, and often patience pays off. I mean, Imhoff and Gomez Cordella, exactly the same. They were always there. They just weren't picked based on politics more than anything else. Look, we've got these good guys in Argentina. Let's just trust them. So
that's right. And they love their front rowers over in France. They're often the first picked in the team. I was singing to the highest praises of Cordella last week. He played 75 minutes and was just immense. But he's a classic front rower build. And I thought he just pulled off some athletic feats last week. He was making some diving, covering tackles, things like that. He was brilliant. But look, speaking of 35 years is young these days. I mean, another player who they could have brought back, Augustin Creevy. How bad do we feel for him that he just finishes up and they get the victory against the All Blacks?
Yeah. Well, but he's really happy for the team. He's been on social media.
For sure.
The reality is he's got a young child, and Argentina. What's going on there is an absolute mess. I mean, I don't want to get into it here, but let's just say that anyone who had an offer from London Irish and says no, you're pretty crazy. So he got the offer, and they wanted him right away. So that's what's different between him and some of the other guys. Like Orlando, he's going to England in December. It's already official, but he's playing in the Tri-Nations. So that's basically what happened with Cargie. They wanted him right away, and he, of course, he should have taken it. He did the right thing.
Absolutely.
But I mean, look at the age he is, and look at who they have. Montoya, for goodness sake. I mean, he actually took over Cargie in the World Cup itself. So
yeah, he did.
You could debate who would be starting now. But I mean, it's a good thing and a bad thing, because obviously bad for the player involved. But I mean, Argentina do have other players, and I mean, Sokina was brought back from England to play Super Rugby, for example.
Just on that quickly. Are there any other players that we haven't thought of, international players that would be starters or on the bench? I mean, the only other player I can think of at the top of my head was Thomas Lavanini. But is there anyone else who you could pick from overseas, England or France, and could immediately start the Argie's team?
Yeah, Lavanini is the big one. I mean, right now, I'd probably say no. But there are some players you would say are in the conversation. For example, there's an uncapped guy called Axel Muller who plays for Brive, and I mean, he's uncapped, so you can't really say much more than that. But he's really good. Would be in an opportunity on merit. Other players, I can't realistically say. I think they're basically all got the call up.
Okay.
Maroney would be there if he was fit, but he's injured. He's joining Leicester in December. Rudy Pichetta was dropped. Look, the guy's 34. It was time to look somewhere else.
That's good. I just wanted to see if there was anyone. You usually come up with some players we haven't heard of, so I thought. I thought we had the bases pretty well covered. Look, speaking of players from overseas, we mentioned him before. Facundo Issa. I thought, look, Rodrigo Bruni has a great game. Both Bruni and Issa are both 27 years old, about the same size. But for me, Issa is just one of the most explosive players in world rugby. And I think he showed that when he came on at the end of the game. He was immense. Just a few carries and hits. I thought he's fantastic. Surely he's going to be pushing for a starting berth.
Yeah, that back row has got to be, one of the best in the world. It's Matera, Crema, Issa. I can't think of a back row pairing that I think are better. South Africa.
Yeah, we're pretty. Over here we're pretty confident. Very happy with them. In the past, we've had one or two good back rowers in the Pumas, but often they've carried them. Like Fernandez Lovey, for example, just phenomenal.
Yeah.
One of the greats from the last decade. But often he had a guy or two of them with him who were substandard, or just no one to kick them or anything like that. But now we've got the three guys you mentioned. Absolutely phenomenal. I think Bruni, is starting based on Issa having been injured.
Yep.
He was injured for too long and traveled anyway, and now he's fit. So, but also Bruni, if you look at him, he's really bulked up a lot.
Yeah.
So, a lot. Like looks much bigger. So that's good, obviously. And they're both doing well. And what more can you say? There's also a guy who's traveling. He hasn't played yet. He's uncapped. Who a lot of people are really excited about. So he's Joaquin Oviedo. He's a number 8. He's 19.
You get greedy, mate. You got too many number 8s.
So, yeah, well, I mean that's one of the things about Argentina. They've always produced players in certain positions. So number 8's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. The Argentinian team definitely doesn't lack any huge men, does it?